All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome in GC Live. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. Shout out to everybody already in the chat. I see you, BRC, Gamecock, and Michael Lynn. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope everybody else is doing well, too. Again, I'm Wes. He's Chris. Got Travis Edwards joining us as well. Still Curtin in the house. Lots of folks in the chat. Regardless of if you're listening to us live on YouTube or after the fact on all the podcast platforms, we do appreciate you for joining us. Got a jam-packed show here today. As always, brought to you by our friend Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. As always, if you're in the market to buy a new home, call our guy Clint. He's going to take great care of you. There's the new number we've been giving you. That's his cell phone number, 803-422-6797. As I put in the show headline, unlike about every national podcast I've seen put out a show today, we have not played EA College Football 25. No. We have, however, talked to Matt Brown of the Extra Point.
That's about as close as you can get.
Yes, we have talked to him, and he has played it. So be on the lookout. I'm working on the YouTube version to post that on the Gamecock Central YouTube here shortly. If you're listening to us live, that'll probably be up maybe 30 minutes after the show. If you are listening to us after the fact, it's probably already on there. Just go to youtube.com/Gamecock Central. For the most part, we're going to be talking football recruiting as South Carolina rolls into a first of what I would say are three big recruiting weekends for the Gamecocks. And so if you're listening to this later in the week, there's always a chance, bear with us. Maybe a guy gets subtracted at the last second. Maybe a guy gets added at the last second. But for the most part, this episode is going to serve as our big preview for what is a big weekend. And Chris, as you sort through this list, it does have a little bit of everything. It has multiple positions, has some guys that I think are more like highly recruited, what we call big boy recruiting battles. It has some guys that I would say South Carolina is a little bit more of a long shot with. It has some guys that I would say South Carolina's in a decent spot with. So really, I think anytime you go into these big weekends, you do get a little bit more, I would say, clarity on where Carolina stands when we kind of get that feedback after these visits.
Yeah, I really like that. You put it more articulately than I had been thinking about it, or you articulated it better. You've got a very interesting group of guys. You've got like a range of rankings, right? Because on one hand, you've got, a top 50 guy on the On3 industry ranking, which is the average of all four major services, in Jared Smith and some other big timers, 4-star type guys. But then on the other hand, you have a guy like AJ Brand, who's from Irmo, and he's a high school quarterback that South Carolina wants as a DB, right? So you've got this range of rankings. You obviously have different positions. But I think the most interesting part is just exactly what you said, like South Carolina's positioning for certain guys. You've got some players that I think South Carolina's got a great shot with, like Brand, like Tayshawn Austin from North Carolina, like Jared Smith, who's a big-time guy, big-time competition, but everything we've heard leads us to believe South Carolina's in a pretty good spot. You've got some guys that Carolina's locked in some big-time battles for, like a Malik Clark from Rock Hill and many others. And then you've got some guys where they pop up on the visitor list in the last, few weeks, or even guys that have been on the visitors list for a while where you go, I wonder if South Carolina can advance that recruitment. A guy, Wes, you wrote about yesterday, Jaden Breaker, who, Notre Dame leads for. They're setting the pace, but and this visit's been booked for a while, but can South Carolina make a move? Winston Watkins, who's a 4-star receiver from Florida, that's one we just uncovered in the past couple weeks, where you go, that's kind of interesting. Can Carolina make a move there? So I think there's just a wide range of not only players, positions, but just stages of each recruitment this weekend for, I think, the 12 guys that are going to be on campus taking officials.
Yeah, and hopefully we can properly set the expectations because, Chris, I think anytime you have these big weekends and we build them up, it'll be a huge weekend. And there's going to be 3 of them that I think in a lot of ways, these three will probably be similar in that you're going to have a similar number of guys. It's going to be a similar mix of, hey, Carolina leads for this guy versus this, player XYZ may be a little bit more of a long shot. And each week, if there aren't any commits by Sunday afternoon, inevitably some people will start to panic on that. And I think you can go back to some of our reporting. You can go back to reporting this out there. You can go back to what Shane Beamer said in Myrtle Beach when he was talking about these guys in general. And pretty much all the guys, except I think he said maybe one, is going to want to make a decision basically this summer, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get caught up, especially week one. This is really the first. Some guys took spring officials, but as far as June recruiting goes, technically it's going to start May 31st, but it'll be a June weekend. This is the first big weekend of the summer. How many of these guys, I mean, it's probably almost all of them, are going to use June to take a bunch of OVs, and then you sort of go home, you, I guess, sit back, see how you perceived everything, process it, and then make a decision. Will there inevitably maybe be a guy or two who just gets, hey, this is where I want to be, there's no point? Yes, but I think it's going to be far-fetched if these guys do not commit. And then also there will be some, I would imagine, some welcome homes where we hear, hey, so somebody has committed, but they won't go public until later on. So just go ahead. I know those who have followed recruiting for a long time probably already know that, but just prepare yourself. Really, you got to judge these weekends, I would say, based on two things. One, what does it look like after the summer is over and all these guys have decided on where they're going? And then two, I think you have to acknowledge which of the guys are kind of long shots coming in and which of the guys aren't. And then, there's some guys on here, Chris, that I think, right or wrong, the staff is going to be judged on a bit just because they're that important, I think, to the recruiting class. I mean, you look at Malik Clark, and to me, that's a guy South Carolina has to make up some ground with. And I was by Rock Hill High School last week, caught up with him, caught up with his coach. And, I think from what I've heard, North Carolina is still, we use the word setting the pace for Blair. I think you look at him and it's kind of a similar situation. I do think he's open to hearing what South Carolina has to say. I think he's open to hearing what NC State has to say. There's going to be a Georgia unofficial. Does Georgia push to get an official visit? Florida State has been pushing for an official visit. But right now, it's those three: North Carolina, South Carolina, NC State. I think Mike Furry has actually done a fantastic job. Malik rattled off the number of guys that South Carolina has put in the NFL the last, decade or so at the receiver position. So that means he's listening. Whenever I always pay attention to when a guy like kind of parrots back what a staff is telling him, but in detail, that means they're probably listening. And so he's someone, I think, when you look at the receiver recruiting out of high school the last couple of years, a guy that's right down the road, a guy that's in Football City, USA, Rock Hill. This is where you landed Stephon Gilmore. This is where you landed Jadeveon Clowney. You can go back countless guys that have come out of that area and gone on to South Carolina. I think regardless of who leads right now, it would be a tough pill to swallow for some South Carolina fans if the Tar Heels come into this state and take him from Rock Hill of all places. So I think that's why this is a big, important weekend for South Carolina to really get him thinking in terms of possibly staying home and playing for the home state school.
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, to go back to the levels on all these guys, there's some players on this list, to be quite frank, longer shots. Like I look at a Cortez Smith, Wes, the 4-star offensive lineman from the state of Georgia. Georgia's in the driver's seat. He's got other visits set. But honestly, to me, from where I sit, would be pretty surprising if he didn't end up at Georgia, presuming that they end up pushing for him, right? You got some others like Winston Watkins, who I mentioned, the 4-star receiver out of Florida, where you go, honestly, former Colorado commitment, you really don't have a sense even of where things stand. I think the summer is going to fully dictate that, but you have some others where it's that big recruiting battle that I referenced, where it's narrowed down to maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 schools. A lot of those guys that are visiting this weekend are very much in that boat. And, it's a tough decision for these guys. They've got good options. South Carolina's up first with this batch of guys. They're going to be last. They'll be the last official visit for some other guys that June 21st weekend. Zayden Walker, the 5-star from Georgia, they'll get his last official as of right now before he decides. So there's different levels. There's different timelines for all these guys. You can't bring in all, 30, 40 of your official visitors in one weekend. It logistically just does not work. And so, don't panic. They're not going to get 12 public commitments on Sunday. They're not going to get 12 private commitments on Sunday, right? They're probably not going to get all 12 of these guys committed. That would be a huge, huge shock. But you do want to have, somewhat of a hit rate. You want to look back, in August, September, when most of these guys presumably will have committed somewhere, and you want to have landed some of these players. And so Malik Clark from Rock Hill is someone that definitely falls into that category of the field has been narrowed a bit already. He's got these officials set. Could another school or two jump in there in the mix a little bit more? Yeah, but right now, this looks like more of a battle of the Carolinas between North Carolina and South Carolina. And Wes, we know, we pay attention for a lot of reasons to what Gamecock fans latch onto with storylines and things that they care about. And how much conversation has there been over the years of guys leaving the state of South Carolina? It's one thing to miss on a guy from Georgia, North Carolina, wherever, but missing on a guy from the state who could help you. Remember about Jalen Hyatt, right? When he goes to Tennessee, South Carolina didn't pursue him, right? That's not the case here. South Carolina fully pursuing Malik Clark, and they have been a long time, but that's not a guy that you want to look at in 2 or 3 years and see him wearing North Carolina blue. Like you said, that would be a tough pill to swallow. So, levels to it. There's certain guys, Cortez Smith, Blair, etc. You take a swing at those guys and see what happens. Some others are more of prospects that I don't know if you want to say counting on, but I think are more integral to the success of this class and how it's going to be judged.
Yeah, and, we may be able to go ahead and broadly, Chris, categorize these guys, I think. And, I think to an extent, take a swing guys would be more like, all right, they're interested enough and just too good that you don't take a swing, right? And you maybe deep down don't even know, think you're going to actually get them, but you're like, let's take a shot at it. And, I look at this group, Blair, not only does he have Notre Dame out front, but I think Penn State and Michigan, based on his comments at the On 3 Elite Series, I think they're next. So I also, I was sent an interview with him down there that I then used. It didn't quite seem like, other than Torian Gray, who he loves, it didn't quite seem like he had as much of an understanding about the South Carolina program as maybe some of those other programs. So once you spend an entire weekend sort of exposing the program to him, does that put you in a spot to where you can make a big jump? Potentially. I mean, that's why you bring guys in, that's why you take a shot with other guys. Cortez Smith, I think he has had genuine interest in South Carolina for quite some time. He's been on campus several times. He's given them a chance to recruit him. Like all these guys, he seems to really like Lonnie Teasley, Sam Survey, that whole group. It's just a matter, this is a true blue chip guy. Can you go beat Georgia with a guy in Georgia for him? I think you start going down the list. Then there's some other guys that I would almost put, let's see, we got Blair, Smith. I would put Dontrell Glover maybe in the take a swing category. Let's just see what happens.
Yep.
You got some other guys I would put almost in the incomplete category, like Winston Watkins Jr. Who knows? I mean, he really hasn't had a big. It's what isn't a guy that's been on campus 10 times or has been in here that we've been following for months and months and months. So he comes in, he's going to have a good time, but does he kind of fall in love with the place, or does he take the visit and we really never hear much about him again? Like it could go either way. So I would put him more in the incomplete category. I think Jeffrey Overton, you would probably say is a little bit incomplete category, but also I think maybe he's a little bit more manageable. You just look at the fact that even though he only recently got the offer, Chris, they've been recruiting him for a while. Marquell Blackwell had, I think really recruited him from the moment he got here. And you kind of look at the competition there. He's not that kind of blue chip 4-star guy. Maybe Overton is the high school back in this class. Like, I don't think that's really that far-fetched at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. You look at his list, Wes, and he falls into that category of, okay, here's a kid from Virginia who is mostly looking outside of the SEC, aside from South Carolina. That's been a selling point for Shane Beamer and his program. We are the closest SEC program to the DMV, right? To Virginia, to Washington, D.C., to Maryland. We see them do really well and be very active in that region. And that's been a selling point for them. If you want to come play big-time football, come play in the SEC. By the way, we're the closest program in order to do that. You look at the rest of his list, it's Maryland, it's Virginia, it's Virginia Tech. It's actually all the schools, for those of you who are visual, and if you're on the live version of the show, or the video version, the On3 RPM favors Maryland right now. I don't know if you make too much of that, right? It's a little bit more of like follow the visits and things like that. But those are his other visits. Maryland, Virginia Tech, Virginia, those will come after South Carolina. So what kind of bar can South Carolina set with this first visit? It might be a huge one. He comes from a family of coaches. His father, and I believe his uncle as well, coaches up in Virginia. They know Shane Beamer. They know Shane's dad, Frank. They know of him and what those guys did as assistant coach and head coach, respectively, at Virginia Tech. The Beamers are, household names in the state of Virginia. And I think Shane Beamer's been able to leverage that a good bit. So this is one where I put him, Wes, in the incomplete category, but almost with a caveat of like, this is one that I don't think you have to stretch to be like, I think this one, you could see it advancing pretty quickly if it goes well this weekend. And I think it will.
Yeah, and I think there are several guys you could maybe put in that category. Even, maybe it's a little bit further along. But I think Jaden Breaker is a guy who it was a little bit later offer than maybe some of these other guys that we saw for South Carolina at the linebacker position. But it is my understanding that he took that offer to heart. Like it meant a lot to him. You see the early official visit set up here now. And, he's someone offer list, a little bit under the radar guy. Kentucky's offered. NC State, I think, was one of his early offers. Not even a completely filled out profile yet in terms of rankings and ratings. So a little bit more under the radar guy, maybe kind of like a Fred Johnson potentially for South Carolina, somebody that's got some athleticism and could maybe climb the rankings as the process goes on. But Breaker, if I remember correctly, and I think you interviewed him, Chris. Didn't he visit when he got the offer in the spring?
He was on campus when he got the offer. That's right.
Yeah, I kind of think he's a guy to watch in terms of being in this class. It just has a lot of markers of a guy that could be an early commit, I think.
I agree. I do like the comparison to Fred Johnson, not only in the maybe the athletic profile and size, but also the recruitment. Remember, Fred was a guy that, another from Virginia, Breaker's from Georgia, but Fred Johnson was a guy from Virginia that Carolina knew about. They had him in camp. They saw him in camp and offered him then. But when they offered him, he wasn't this super highly recruited guy, but you just got the sense of like, all right, Carolina's offered. This guy really checked all the boxes in camp. There's a really good shot that they end up getting this guy, and I kind of have, there's not info behind it yet on Breaker. It's hard to put him in the Carolina leads category. He has at least visited, but it's almost one where I would say like a little bit past Overton even. Like I think they're going to end up having a really good shot with that guy. But you have to go through the visit this weekend, make sure everything checks out on both sides. But once that happens, I really feel like this is one we're going to be monitoring pretty heavily going forward.
Yeah, it seems like NC State is popping up a lot with some of these South Carolina targets. I think Breaker has, actually reading now, I think he maybe has 5 officials set up. So maybe we'll go through the process. We'll see, but South Carolina should definitely be in it. And, Tayshawn Austin, we'll see. That's a guy that's been on Carolina's radar for quite some time, has visited several times. Let's see. Who else do you want to talk about here, Chris? Isaac Souls Jr., Spike. I mean, Spike is a guy that's been on campus many times. He's an interior offensive lineman who, if he was a little bit taller, would probably have offers from everybody in the country. He has been an MVP like camp guy at pretty much every camp he's been to, I feel like. Has visited several times along with his family. Now, Chris, I was told on him that NC State feels really, really good. Like really good here. Then I kind of ran that by some people I know, and I've kind of heard, hey, well, South Carolina feels pretty good here too. So I think that you look at his recruitment, these officials are going to be very big for him. He's an interview guy, and what I mean by that is he'll talk to you, he'll give detailed answers. He's going to like put some thought into everything. I don't think he's necessarily an NIL guy where it's just going to be about, NIL resources. Like I think it's going to be a true little bit of an old school recruitment here. It just feels to me like he's taking a detail oriented, like making a concerted effort to go through every single program and what they have to offer to him. I think South Carolina has quietly positioned themselves in a pretty good spot for this kid. And I think he'd be a fantastic addition to this class when you look at how Carolina has recruited in the high school ranks the last couple of cycles.
Yeah, I remember seeing Spike, and I think it was maybe not last summer's camp, but the one before, if I'm not mistaken. And you're just watching this kid and you're hearing the coaches, Spike, good job, Spike, and all. And you're like, man, who is this guy? And you kind of do some research and find out it's Isaac Sowles. And my impression was, like you said, Wes, like a little bit undersized. Like you can tell he's not a 6'5" offensive lineman, but was just really technically sound. His father played in the NFL, is now a high school coach. Dad played at Indiana. Is that right, Wes? I think that's correct. Now they're in Louisville. And he's someone that I've had to stop myself. I've had to stop short of saying that South Carolina leads, because I think there are a lot of signs and indicators there that the Gamecocks have been in a pretty good spot. But he does still have the Final Five. You do hear exactly what you said, Wes, some things about NC State and some other programs that have remained in the mix. You know that he's got the summer full of official visits to, NC State, Louisville, Miami. He's got programs remaining on his list. So I think if you're the Gamecocks, you're in a pretty good spot, but this is one you're going to have to close out. And I think it would be a great get for sure. And Carolina's recruited obviously very well, especially the last couple of cycles. They've stacked some young talent on the O-line, but this guy I think would be a great get, kind of a future leader type on the offensive line. But they're going to have to, close out a summer visit slate like so many of these other players. He's got a full, schedule of visits this summer.
Yeah, and some guys have positive things to say about most of the programs they visit. So you almost can't get too caught up in the super positive quotes because, like I said, he'll talk, he'll give you great well thought out answers. So you can't completely read into it. And again, NC State, I think they feel really, really good from what I've heard, but the Gamecocks right there in this one as well. And, certainly a chance, I think, to build a nice lead this weekend as he rolls in, and you kind of get to set the stage and make everybody else potentially there's an advantage to going last, but there's also an advantage to going first if you can set the bar so high that everybody else is chasing you. So you'll take an OV from some of these guys anytime you can get it, but I want to go first or last, honestly, if I could pick one. So there's not – everybody likes to think, I want to go last. Going first, nothing wrong with that either. By the way, before we move on, we're going to talk about the rest of these guys, but I'm going to tell you guys about one of our awesome sponsors. That's our friend Andy from My Perfect Franchise. You can find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. Call Andy today, 404-973-9901. You can text him or you can email him, Andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Andy, a longtime sponsor of several of the sites and podcasts on the On3 network. And you may be saying, what does My Perfect Franchise do? Andy is a franchise consultant, which means he helps people find franchises that will fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. One of the best things about it, his services are 100% free. He is here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership, because he is a business owner himself. So if you're looking for that side hustle, maybe you want to either get out of your current job or supplement with that side job, diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help you do that. Again, 404-973-9901. Chris, a guy that I think has landed at the top of many Gamecock fans' wish lists for this class. From Hoover, Alabama, Thompson High. And, here's Sterling Lucas again, just getting himself in a big boy recruiting battle. Jared Smith, the guy that I think rightfully so, Gamecock fans starting to imagine, could you pair him up with the Dylan Stewart? Could you pair him up with some of these guys we're seeing South Carolina recruit on the defensive front? And, I think you could. I think they're in great shape going into this visit. But like with these other guys, you got to finish it out.
Yeah, this is one where I use I think I stole this from, in terms of a scouting term, from Charles Power and just applying it to the recruiting world. But indicators, Jared Smith, someone that visited Carolina in January, someone that visited Carolina again in April, and then they're first up on the official visit slate. So you do get a chance to set the bar here, Wes. And, the competition is stiff again. Ole Miss, Georgia, Southern Cal, Auburn, like the usual players are here, right? And Sterling Lucas has done a great job. Like, normally you would look at a guy like Jared Smith for South Carolina and you would put him in that take a swing category and see what happens. But Sterling Lucas has progressed beyond that with Jared Smith. He's taking a swing, but he's right in the game here. And I think not just in the game, they might be in pole position heading into that one. There's been a lot of positive signs, and now it's just about continuing the good momentum with this official visit weekend. And it's about holding off all these other suitors who are also, very, very good at recruiting and have a lot of resources at their disposal, and a lot of them big trophy cases, right? But Sterling Lucas is, if you want someone in a big boy recruiting battle, he's proven that he can get in them and that he can win them at times. And so he's done really good work here.
Yeah, and hopefully if you're on the video version that y'all can read that. Hopefully it's not too small. But, I mean, you look at his profile right now, Chris, and hopefully this is updated as well. South Carolina this weekend for an official, Georgia, Tennessee, Southern Cal on like back-to-back weekends. You can do a fantastic job and still not land a guy when you're talking about that type of competition. So I think it's important for South Carolina this weekend to answer pretty much all the questions. I think I think they need to come out of this weekend feeling like Jared Smith is pretty much on the commit list and already pictures himself playing at South Carolina. Like, I think that's the key when you have one of the early visits. You don't want that guy to be processing the visit and like, oh, there's one of my visits. Let's compare it to the other three. You want that guy to be leaving Columbia on Sunday, picking out his jersey number, basically, that he, in his mind, mentally, has already picked the Gamecocks, and it's just going to follow through for some great food and some free trips, basically. I think if he leaves and he's still kind of unsure, and we may not know one way or the other what he's really thinking, then that's when you're like, man, you're going up against Georgia, Southern Cal, Tennessee, Ole Miss in there. That's tough. It's tough. But, you know, we've seen South Carolina. You go right back to Dylan Stewart. Look at Nick Harbor the year before. They have battled the roller coaster aspect of some of these big recruitments and come out on the other end. So we'll see how this weekend goes. I'd imagine you want him spending some time with Dylan Stewart, right? You want him kind of talking about why he chose South Carolina over some of the bigger name schools, what it's been like so far, and ultimately the possibility of teaming up, I would think.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want. And, you know, this one is going to continue to be a battle. Like, you know, you did a good job, I think, Wes, at the beginning, laying out some ground rules and some, like, set some expectations. You know, another one I think to touch on is that in a recruitment like Jared Smith, you are never going to land a prospect of his caliber just uncontested. Like, the other schools aren't just saying, good job, Sterling Lucas in South Carolina. You can have him. Great job. You know, even the bluest of bloods who are in the top 5 or 10 every year in recruiting, they get in absolute battles, and sometimes they even lose guys, believe it or not. So if you're South Carolina, you want to recruit, you know, the more blue chippers like Jared Smith that you can recruit, like magic, the better football team you have. You know, this is how it works. Coaching and scheme and all those things, those are, yes, very important. Ultimately, the teams with the best players win the most football games, and those are the ones that win championships. These are the kind of guys you got to go out and get. But just because a guy doesn't immediately commit on his first visit doesn't mean he doesn't like your school or that he's playing games. Sometimes it's tough. Look at that visit list. You know, he's going to go to, assuming he holds true to the schedule, he's going to go to South Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and Southern Cal and all these very impressive places with tons of resources and trophies and things like that. It's hard to win those battles. But Carolina has a legitimate shot to pull this one off. So sometimes some patience is required, and sometimes there's a bit of a roller coaster on some of these battles. I think the question is just how high of a bar can you set if you're South Carolina, and can you end up surviving this thing to land a big time prospect in Jared Smith.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Before we talk about probably the last guy we'll talk about, I think I'm having a little unstable connection here, Chris. You want to tell everybody about how exclusively to our podcast crew they can get this special deal on Gamecock Central?
I would be glad to. You literally can't find this anywhere else. It is not promoted on any other social media. It's not promoted on Gamecock Central. We don't even walk around and tell anybody about it. Like, you literally, if people said, hey, can you tell me about that stream only deal? I'd say, well, you got to go back and watch the show and find out about it. It is a special offer, YouTube only, $1 for 2 months. That means you get your first 2 months of access to GamecockCentral.com to read everything that we have, get on the Insiders Forum where all our members hang out. It's like social media, but only Gamecocks. You're not allowed. No Clemson fans are allowed. Nobody else. You can go there, hang out, ask Wes questions, ask me questions, and you get access to every single – you don't have to worry about ever running into a paywall. Like, you get all the content that we produce on a daily basis. SCAR1, SCAR1, $1 for your first 2 months. And I think you'll enjoy it. It's a really good time to do it too, Wes, because, man, even if it was $1 for 1 month, Like, you're going to get the entire month of June, which is official visits, unofficial visits. We're going to be out at the camps this summer, new offers, probably going to be some welcome homes this month and a lot of different things to follow. But you don't just get June. You would actually, if you signed up today, you get 2 months. So pretty good deal there. Go check it out. Scar One.
Yeah, let's welcome our newest member, Michael Lynn. He says he's taking it. He's signing up. Everybody out there, be like Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Take advantage of that deal. Sign up for GamecockCentral.com. Chris, the next guy we're going to talk about has flown a little bit under the radar as of late. If you've been following this recruiting class, you're well aware of the name Jaylen Gilchrist. He's a guy that's, I would say, been on campus probably for most of the process as much as anybody. And, early on, I think even going back, it kind of runs together, frankly. Going back to like last summer, he was already somebody we were hearing about as maybe South Carolina leads for this kid, even though he's a big-time blue-chip offensive lineman. They've done a great job, I feel like, in the state of Virginia. He's another one. They've gotten him on campus. Kind of at times in the past, Chris, we've talked about like that step-by-step, how you want to get a guy in for like camp. You want to get him in for a junior day. You want to get him in for a game. I think he was actually in Charlotte for the opener last year. So you got him in for a neutral site game. So step by step, you've had him in the whole way. I don't think he made it this spring, which was kind of the first step of the process that he didn't make it in. And so you'll get him back in this weekend. You'll get to kind of just remind him of all the things, all the reasons why. Now, he's never named a public leader, but I think South Carolina has been the leader here. I think this is an opportunity. It's another big battle. Like you're battling some schools, but I think the comfort level there with Teasley and Sorbet and that whole group is extremely high. And he's one, I don't want to set the expectation for a commit this weekend. We'll see what his big picture plan is. But I think he's one you do enter this weekend feeling pretty good about where you stand.
Yeah, he's another one, Wes, that appears to have some summer official visits lined up. But there have been, some encouraging signs along the way for South Carolina for their chances ultimately. And I think, it seems like Jaylen Gilchrist is one of those players that they have been recruiting for a very long time. And really, they have. That's why. It's literally, they have been recruiting him for quite a while. The relationships are really strong here between the coaching staff and Jaylen and his family members. They've done really good work there. I think there's a high trust level. And to get him back, I think is important because there has been a little bit of lag, as you pointed out, in the visit kind of timeline, although you've had him on campus several times. So this will be a reminder. It's a chance for him to kind of fall in love with South Carolina and Columbia all over again. And if I had to say, Wes, I really feel like this one's going to go extremely well. And that while I wouldn't sit here and project this one's going to end this weekend, even privately, I feel like they're going to set the bar pretty darn high. South Carolina's kind of been this team to beat all along, you feel like. I really think this weekend's going to go a ways towards bolstering South Carolina's position here.
Yeah, for sure. Travis said, what exactly does Sam Sorbet do? He's so every guy on staff in the recruiting department kind of has a position that they end up taking, I guess, helping with. And Sorbet is heavily involved with the O-line group. So that's why you see a lot of these O-line guys in that class talk about him. Technically, I think he's recruiting communications and player personnel assistant, I think would be the title. But everybody in that office kind of has a position or two that they specifically help out with, I think is the best way to say it. And O-line is his spot. So trying to see here, Chris, if we've hit on most of the guys. I know we didn't really hit on Tayshawn. Frankly, I don't know if I have anything new on him. He's a guy I'll be interested to see what the feedback is. I'm going to visit this week About Blake Cortez Smith. You will, if you go to Gamecock Central, you will see, if you hit recruiting and then hit visits, you can see a list of those scheduled official visits right there. And that's actually, you don't have to be a subscriber for that. You can see that without being a subscriber.
Yeah, just a little bit more on Austin West. Another guy that's visited multiple times, like early offer for South Carolina, has some positional versatility, but someone that probably profiles as a linebacker for them. He's from North Carolina. That's the thing, Wes. There's some kids in North Carolina in 2025 and really especially in 2026, which we'll not really tracking that this weekend, where South Carolina has a chance to get back on the board. They actually got Brian Rowe committed from Concord, North Carolina in this class. He was the first North Carolina commitment that the Gamecocks had landed in quite a while. So Carolina's got a few more kids from the neighboring state that they're recruiting, and he's one of those guys.
Chris, you want to take this question?
Still a possibility. Yes, he is. And for those who maybe need a refresher on Xavion Hardy, junior college prospect now, originally from Macon, Georgia, and originally a Gamecock commitment in the 2023 class, was kind of a longer shot to qualify when he committed in junior college now, and has since picked up some other offers. Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn's recruiting him, Georgia's recruiting him a bit, and has some officials set up this summer. He will be in Columbia later this summer, I think on that final weekend, last I checked, for an official visit. And Carolina, still a guy that they want, and a guy that, as Travis Edwards said here in the comments, they could certainly use, because defensive tackle is a big priority this recruiting cycle for sure, whether it's high school guys, junior college guys like Hardy, or the transfer portal. I think you're going to see them mine all three of those levels looking for defensive tackle help.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to, man. I mean, that's probably one of the deepest positions on this team for this year, but so many of those guys are veterans that you are going to have to kind of maybe try to rebuild that depth chart. Luckily, 2024, you can do that. You can do that with multiple different areas where you can bring in some veterans, you can bring in a JUCO guy, and you can bring in a couple of high school guys as well. And one of those guys, Caleb Williams, will be on campus this weekend as a committed official visitor who committed the weekend of the spring game to South Carolina. All right, y'all, we're going to get out of here. You see that baseball background on the video version. So I believe, let's see, tomorrow's Thursday. I believe Jack and Joe, is that right, Chris? They'll be doing a baseball version tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
So they'll get you ready for the regional. Chris and I will leave that to them. And then, of course, if there's anything between now and the weekend, and then throughout the weekend, and then, of course, after the weekend, we'll have you completely covered on a big recruiting weekend for the Gamecocks. And on Friday, first Shane Beamer camp of the summer. So May 31st, they'll have high school kids in. The whole staff will be out there. Beamer will be out there. We'll have complete coverage of that for you on GamecockCentral.com as well. Again, use that code SCAR1 if you're not a subscriber to get 2 months for $1. All right, y'all. Appreciate everybody who joined us. For Chris, I'm Wes. Y'all have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.